Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia, and this is my mother, Ema. Hey, Ema.
Hey, my little sweetheart. So anyway, when you called on the video, I said I was wondering if you were at your house because I never noticed that painting behind you before.
Yeah, so
It's
the
nice.
painting supposedly Tati got for Bubby and Pop for their apartment. Um, but I don't know where he got it from specifically. It's a French painting, a view of Notre Dame. Um, so you said Tati was in New Orleans back in the day?
Yeah. Before I think when he was in college, I think he and his family, or I don't know if he went with some friends or if he went with his family, but yeah, they went to New Orleans. Yeah.
Oh, he never talked about it. I don't know, he didn't talk much. It was always one of those, boomer men kind of thing of like not talking about anything. I don't know. That or I just never got any communication from him in that way.
I've spoken to quite a few people who've been to New Orleans, and I get like mixed reactions. Like some people say, "Oh, it was so great." They said they all say that the best thing about it is the Dixieland jazz that you
Oh,
hear there on practically every corner. There's street musicians coming from the bars. The Dixieland jazz down there is just marvelous. But this one woman said to me, she says, you're walking down the street and you know something's got to be strange about this city. Something's going to be totally wrong because you look up and what do you see? You see ships sailing above you.
oh wow. Yeah, that explains Katrina.
Because you got, actually, it was I think it was an artificially created piece of land that they like Holland, where they built these levees to push back the water.
Yeah, I think they were made in like the early 1800s and they weren't really kept up very well, if I'm not mistaken. Like that
Well,
was
there was supposed to be money uh, after Katrina. There was a big investigation because evidently there was federal money that was sent that they were supposed to rebuild or reinforce the levees, and it mysteriously disappeared, as
mm,
so much money does in so many cities.
yeah, like Baltimore City had this whole issue because they got a giant funding for education because their education is like so freaking low that the average Baltimore City public school student that graduates is on average a 1.4 GPA. And it just all the money just goes missing or like the ladies and men that are in charge get like whopping huge paychecks and no one else sees that money and everyone else has to struggle. And it's like they've been getting away with this for years. It's so sad.
So what's been going on? So they did an investigation recently, or what?
They were doing some investigations of some stuff. Um, I think they someone got fired. But it doesn't solve anything.
No.
Like we got this new commissioner, like I would say 2, 3 years ago, who was um who was actually from New Orleans and who's gonna clean up house and really fix things up and it's
Maybe
still
he
the
knows something
same.
about. Maybe he knows something about the missing levy, no, levy money.
Maybe
Maybe
it's the
that's why he's in
same old.
Baltimore, not New Orleans.
Yeah, yeah, it's the same old. It's just like I'll be shocked when things actually change and actually make a difference. But it's just every single city like politicians just some corrupt guy trying to line his pockets. But what's interesting though, there was this. I'm trying to think what it was exactly. Oh, so it was like there was issues in Baltimore City about recycling that they kind of paused the recycling and they weren't picking up the recycling and but they got funding and there was just all these typical Baltimore City corruption issues. And I think it was I think I think it was Councilman Yitzi Schleifer who like basically got up in their face and was like, there's money that's missing. What is going on? Either give us a receipt or like you will see, the wrath basically. And sure enough, they like everything got back on track and we got recycling going and garbage going. you know?
Good. Good.
Like
I
there,
tell you the truth, I don't want, I don't like taking up the attitude of, oh, well, what are you going to do? Because once the majority of the people get that attitude of, oh, well, business as usual and just throw up their hands and so what, then the, the corrupt politicians have won. They have
oh yeah,
totally won.
oh
You
yeah.
can't take that attitude. You got to continue fighting.
Well, the only way to fight is to vote. That's really the truth. It's like that's the only power that people have, really. Do your education, stay informed, and when push comes to shove and you have the opportunity to vote, that's what you can do. Nothing like I don't want to say nothing else changes the other way, but it's like people feel powerless because you do feel like you're only one person, and you also feel like what can I do to get everyone band together? I could barely get my family to listen to me. You know, it's like everyone has that feeling where it's like I can try, I can voice my opinion. And I think also with social media kind of pushed that point where it's like, I'm going to speak what's on my mind. And the sad reality is most people's things that are on their mind are kind of stupid or not entertaining and not interesting. So it's like you have these platforms to express so much, and it's just you have idiots flaunting their food or flaunting their trips or vacations or these obnoxious like pictures of you know just stupid junk, and it's like then they want to go ahead and get political. They're not very concise, they're not very like comprehensive. It just sounds like you're screaming into a void. So it's like all these opportunities that people have, it's almost as if like it's two steps forward, three steps back almost.
Well, don't let your heart be troubled. Let's put it this way. The United States is still here. We've come this far. And there are, there are people who do take it seriously and are continuing to fight the good fight. And, you know, the United States is, and local governments have gone through ups and downs throughout
Yeah.
our history. But in the end, things, in the end, I hate to sound fundamentalist, but in the end, good. If you look at the run of history, even though evil and corruption might have its victories, might win battles, good eventually does win the war.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. It's just I feel like now more than ever people just it just feels like depressingly impossible. I actually do have a question for you. Like, for everything that we're talking about, do you feel like you've ever made a difference?
It's funny because I was remembering um, how I did make a difference in a curriculum when I was only 11 years old.
What do you mean? Did we talk about this?
Was this the one about the when I was in sixth grade, the Crusades? We're supposed to
No,
study history.
I don't think you've ever talked about this.
Okay, here's what happened. Um, I was in sixth grade. We were beginning of sixth grade. We're starting our history unit, and teacher passes out these books, and we're supposed to study world history. And we open up the first chapter is about the Crusades. So the teacher who was Jewish, by the way, and I'm attending a school that's like 80% Jewish, at the time, public school.
Yeah.
And I remember the teacher asking one of the kids in the class to read the first paragraph, and it talks about how the Crusaders were the aim of the Crusaders was to redeem the Holy Land. So the teacher says, "Okay, what was the purpose of the Crusaders?" And so one of the kids says, to quote what does it say in the first paragraph about the Crusaders? And this, girl says, it says that they tried to redeem the Holy Land. And the teacher said, yeah, that's right. They tried to redeem the Holy Land. So I raised my hand and
Yeah.
I said, that's not what we learned in Hebrew school. We learned that the Crusaders murdered many innocent Jewish men, women, and children. And all the other Jewish kids in the class, like it was a mixed class, Christian and Jewish. All the other Jewish kids in the class said, "Yeah, that's what we learned." And there's this like silence, and the teacher goes, And she closes her book and she goes, you know what? Let's go on to science. So we went on to science. The next day, the teacher comes in, all the history books are collected, and
Yeah.
the teacher announces, this year we are going to study the United States government.
That's awesome. That is awesome. It's like, I don't know. Because I was talking to my boss and my coworkers today. We were just having conversations about architecture, and it's just like I have this weird goal where like I want to do a building that's famous. You know,
Ooh.
I feel like like if I was doing like the Guggenheim or you know the Empire State Building or something, some like iconic building that stands out for centuries, that's just going to be known for. Like in a way, like that is what's motivating me. But like I'm realizing now, it's like it's not going to happen. That's never going to happen. I'm never going to get that opportunity because it's just like I just don't see a possibility. And I think for me at least, that's how I'm kind of feeling when it comes to like, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to be or want to have in a way that makes you feel like you may have had an impact in this world? Because
Well,
it's
you
like
told me about that one building the one firm that you worked for was redesigning that strip joint down on the block. Now that's iconic.
it is very iconic. No, I just, you want to make these impacts. You want to have these like stories. You grow up as a kid being told you could do whatever you want, and then you wake up and you realize, no, you're just some, cog in a machine, and you have to just crank it out because if you stop working, you could be easily replaced.
I think there's something about um, I don't know if it's been in past generations. 'Cause I think like past generations, people were just happy if they lived to see the end of the day, if they lived to see tomorrow and had enough food on the table. But I think with our generation, with television and media and movies and everything, and um, I think there's this, I don't know what it is. There's this like overwhelming desire in um, modern generations for the average person, for the average kid growing up, to want to be famous. We want to be famous, want to be famous.
Yeah,
We want to be known, want to be famous. And the reality of that situation is, that's not very, it's not very real. It's not really
no,
handling life on a realistic plane. I mean, if you do what you have to do and you live your life the way you're supposed to and you put your best foot forward, okay, if you happen to become, I don't want to say infamous, but famous. I don't know. So there are some people though who,
yeah,
unfortunately, every now and then in the news we hear about people who commit these horrible crimes. Why? Because they wanted to be famous. Oh
yeah,
gosh, they wanted to be known. That's not good. But if you're a decent person and if you happen to achieve something that that makes you famous, puts you in the limelight, that puts you in the history books as someone who was a major contributor to that field, well, Baruch Hashem, kol hakavod. But if not, something, the cogs in the wheel are important too, because without that little screw keeping the mechanism going, you'll talk to anybody who's involved in, electronics, plumbing, auto mechanics, yada yada, any of, even like engineers, scientists, whatever, they'll tell you that one little itsy bitsy bit that's missing can bring down the entire mechanism or the entire system.
oh
I
yeah,
remember I had a biology professor in college who he said the more he studied biology, especially the more he studies about the gestation process, the more he believes in God. And it just, as a scientist, it just reaffirms his belief in God. Because he says, because like, for example, the gestation period, he goes, one teeny little molecule, one microscopic chromosome that doesn't split properly, and boom, the whole either the whole pregnancy is gone, or God forbid, you've got an individual who cannot lead a normal life, who's so
yeah,
disabled they cannot lead a normal life. One little itsy bitsy, and microscopic. It's just like everything has to go perfectly in order to
yeah,
create a normal human being. And he says it's a miracle that the majority of people, the vast majority of people, are normal functioning human beings. This is an actual walking miracle that we see in front of our very eyes.
Yeah, because and I think that's the other thing I was trying to get to, where like I don't want to come off like, like depressing or anything like that, but it's like not everybody is going to be the head, but it's still important to be the foot, you know? It's like people like but I think this isn't a generational thing. I think this is just a natural thing where there's like a wanting to be seen and heard and noticed and to be able to feel like they've fulfilled their life. They haven't wasted it away. I look at myself and I'm like, I hope I don't look back in my life and feel like I've wasted it. And I think that's what people just don't want to be a waste. People don't want to be a waste, and it's a fear
Mhm.
that they have. Like have you ever felt like you were a waste or like you didn't feel like you were doing anything productive?
That's a really good question. Well, as a wife and a mother of a large family, um, I I didn't feel that way as a more mature person because I could see like, wow, I mean, I put all Kenai I put all these kids on the face of the earth, and raising them and how they grow up is important, and that's my achrayas. And so I knew, like, in a situation like that, I mean, I knew right away, obviously, obviously my life is not a waste. It can't be. I gotta, it's because obviously if not, if to nobody else, there's 11 people in my life that I am important to. But, uh, you know, um, especially, your father is what making sure that he was taken care of and you guys were taken care of, and yada, yada. I think people, sometimes you talk about, people feeling like their life was a waste. I think these sometimes on the and back in the old psychology talk shows, you
Hmm.
would get people that would call up that would worry about that, about their lives being a waste. And these were people who had never gotten married or had kids. And I think I think getting married and having children adds a lot of meaning to your life. Or if you can't have kids, then at least have some, like a substitute. You know what I mean? Like doing philanthropic, charitable works to fulfill your time, or adopting children, or things like this. Just the fact that you're helping another human being to grow and develop.
Well, I was listening to this like YouTube clip of this psychologist, and he was explaining that the human mind, if you focus on yourself, it's not there to make you happy and feel special. It's there to protect you. It's going to find ways for you to worry and find ways for you to be overtly critical. And it also will create a lot of negative thinking. But when
Hmm.
you focus on somebody else, making sure they're okay, I hope I'm not butchering it, but basically it was saying like something along the lines of like focusing on somebody else helps calm the mind down and not be so worried, so to speak.
That
And
that makes a lot of sense.
and I think that's what it is. I think once people, they start raising children, I saw a statistic where it was like parents are the least happy, but the most fulfilled. Where it's like you're not going to be the happiest, you're going to feel the most fulfilled. And I think there's this feeling of like, I guess, correcting your past and correcting you know, your inner child when you have a child, where you start to see patterns that kind of have similar, that are very similar to, I guess, the way you grew up, and then you kind of redirect them. Like, what have you seen raising us that you've noticed, like, wow, that happened to me as a kid. I'm gonna stop this and redirect it.
Ooh, well, I'm trying to think. Um, yeah, I think discipline, in the area of discipline. I was raised with a lot of hitting, a lot
Mm,
of criticism, and a lot of hitting. And I came to the point where um, I just realized this is no way to raise a child. And that's when I started to look for more positive ways of discipline, like say the behavior mod charts, the giving rewards, having points and rewards, that type of thing. Also, there was all the screaming that went on in my house, and I mean, I did my own. Believe me, I did. I did plenty of screaming in the beginning of raising my kids, but then I came to a point as years went on where I said, I can't. I can't go like this. I can't scream like this. I can't keep losing it. I have to learn to stay calm, and I have to learn to talk in a calm manner. Something happened with your father where there was one day where your sisters, when Yehuda, your brother was a little boy, they were at the dinner table and they were getting on his case. They were starting to criticize him about everything, from the way he was eating to the way he was sitting at the table to the this and the that. I mean, they were really, really, um, like I said, getting on his case, putting him down, whatever. So I said, I decided this is not going to happen on my watch.
hmm
I walked right into the dining room and I said, "You girls, stop. He's not bothering you. Leave him alone." And they go, but, I don't want to hear. And I said, I don't want to hear it. I said, leave him alone. He's not bothering you. Stop putting him down. Stop criticizing him. Stop this right now. So I'm not going to have it. Stop it. And I just wouldn't let them do it. And your father was sitting there smiling at me. And afterwards, your father said to me that he said he was so like touched and just, he was just so happy about what I did. He says, because he remembered when he was growing up, how some of his sisters, the same scenario, were getting on his case, and that his mother sat there and did nothing. And he said, when you came in and you stuck up for Yehuda, he says, it was like I was watching my childhood all over again, only this time it was being played correctly.
yeah. What about Tati? Had he ever talked to you about stuff where it's like he, I guess stopped the cycle with any of us?
I think, yeah, he did. He stopped the cycle of an overly critical father who was not really involved in their child's life. That was unfortunately, well, you can't compare, unfortunately, in our grandparents' generation. Fathers were expected to bring home the bacon and raise their sons to be tough, and that was it. That was their job.
Yeah.
So parents in that generation were over. We look at them today as being overly critical, but in their day, their idea was that they were raising their children to be tough and to face life, and that if you were too praiseworthy, if you were too involved in your kid, if you were too affectionate or whatever, that you're going to raise they're going to be soft.
Yeah.
So my generation was, hey, no, you're not going to raise your kid to be soft if you praise them and if you're affectionate with them. As a matter of fact, you're going to raise them to be very confident, very capable human beings. So your father, he wasn't. He was not really. He was pretty. He wasn't really critical of you kids. I mean, he was a little strict, but
He was strict. I don't think he was critical.
yeah,
I don't think
no.
he was critical. I
And
think,
also, he was very involved. I mean, he was one of the
yes.
few fathers that made it his business to attend PTA meetings,
hmm
to see what you guys were doing in school. If there was a problem, to call the teachers or administrators and get involved.
Yes, he was very much involved like that.
Yeah.
Very much
hmm
involved. Yeah. Because I remember
Especially when he yelled at some of the bad teachers.
well, that's what
Oh,
I
God.
realized. I was gonna say, because I remember I got into trouble when I was in high school, and I was in the principal's office, and Tati told me to like leave the office and like I left the office, and like 5 minutes later, like the principal's like, you can go back to class, it's fine. And I'm like, what did he say? And at one point, I was like getting kind of in trouble, like about a couple months later, and he's like, and the principal was like, like you're gonna get in trouble, and don't you dare call your father. And I'm like, what did he say or do? I am just baffled. My curiosity has been piqued.
I don't know. Your father had an amazing talent for putting the fear of heaven into people. He should have been he should have been a Baptist minister. Who knows?
It's so funny because it's like, it's whatever. I'm not going down that road. Because just like, because just it's interesting. Watch. I was me and Ruthie. We went to a comedy show. We saw this comedian Ali Sadiq. Cool guy. Really enjoyed his show. But he was poking fun and being critical of preachers. And he's like, when you go to these preachers and you ask for money for your business, do you think they're going to give you any money? And everyone shook their head. And like me and Ruth are like, what do you mean? Like, that's what they're there for, right? Don't you like go to your preacher? But like we go to our rabbi if we're stuck in a bind and we have no money and God forbid there's an issue. Like you go to the rabbi directs you to various like free loans like societies, you get some stuff and they help you out. And then like I spoke to a friend of mine, who grew up not Jewish, and I asked him that. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, yeah, they don't give you money. You give them money for God, but they don't give you money.
Oh,
I'm like, what are you I'm like, I was shocked. I was literally shocked. I was baffled.
Well, I had a Catholic friend, a Catholic lady I worked with, and she told me that Sunday that the priest made an announcement that all the money in the dish, they pass around that dish or something.
Yeah.
He says that all the money in the dish today is going to go for a family whose father is unemployed. And she says they were shocked. They said this was the very, very first time in their church that any priest had done this, had donated the church money that week to a family.
Oh wow, that's just odd. But yeah, back to our conversation with like raising children and avoiding vicious cycles.
That is really something to work. That's a very good point. I'm sure everyone does that.
You're supposed to. You're literally supposed to. Like that's like why we're here in this world, to improve on our lives and become better people till eventually Mashiach comes and we no longer have to do this anymore. Like that's why we're here. We have to keep on doing this, keep on doing acts of goodness and kindness, showing avas chinam and being good to one another. And then eventually it's going to get to a point where it's all going to be over. It has to end. Everything has to end. But maybe to the.
Go ahead.
You want to say something?
No, but there are, to look at the Vias HaMashiach like the end of a race, like, oh boy, I'm good. We're all, finished with that. In certain aspects, yes. In certain aspects, no. Like, we won't have to, we won't have to worry about anti-Semitism anymore. We won't have to worry about crime or violence. But as far as our personal lives are concerned, raising our children, making parnasa. I mean, parnasa won't be the struggle that it used to be. If you put forth from the shiurim that I've gone to about the Vias HaMashiach, that we will still need to work, but if we work hard enough, we will succeed. It won't.
But that's life.
We won't, not necessarily, because there are many times in life where we all see this, like people in certain businesses or whatever, that they are working and they are trying and they are striving and they're doing this, everything they possibly can do, and the business still fails.
Well, it's Gati Matsatsi. That's a whole different story, and we can have a whole other podcast about that.
But when Mashiach comes, we won't have that. We'll be in a situation where if you put forth a reasonable amount of effort, you will succeed.
Well, the thing is,
but you're still going to have to work. I think, and you're still going to have to raise children. and you'll
that's
probably occasionally get in the fights with your wife.
no,
So I don't think.
it's going to be a time of peace. I mean, according to Rambam, nothing's really going to change. Everything is still, the cycle's still going to be continuing. It's just the our suffering will end as Yidden. You know, that's really what it is. Our suffering will finally come to an end. You know, I won't have to flip through, you know, Reddit and see a bunch of like anti-Semitic comments that all Jews should die and Israel should just fall into the sea. You
Oh
know, I won't
gosh.
have to worry about, you know, hey, is there ever going to be a time where America is just going to just turn their backs on Jews and be like, all right, sorry guys, bye. You know, we won't have that as a problem. That is really what it's going to be, and then that would be nice. I thought about that today. I'm like, that would be a nice feeling. Like I don't have to have that, like, you know, monkey on my back, as they say. You know.
Hmm. You must be quite a balancing act you have to do at work, in a way, because you're working with non-Jews, and yeah.
It's
Do
interesting
you
because
do you
it's like,
find it challenging at times?
I mean, we're almost out of time, but what I can say is that, like, you know, it was a culture shock at first um, when I was doing, you know, work and whatnot, and like trying to say things or talk to people or say stuff, and I realized I spoke like this language that sounded like English, but it really wasn't. Like we would say, like something's very Heimish is a good thing, but the translation of Heimish is homely, and homely is a bad thing. So you try to say like, oh, it's very Heimish, it's very, you know, it's good, it's Heimish, and they're like, what's Heimish? I'm like, homely, I guess. Like, so things like that would happen.
Well,
Or at one
comfortable,
point,
feeling at home, feeling comfortable.
yeah,
It's Heimish, yeah,
that's what it's supposed to be, but like
yeah.
it just doesn't translate. Or like another thing would be like I was working for a company that was very big in like, you know, give us your charities and we'll do this raffle and we'll all donate to the charity and whatnot. So I was like, okay, whatever. And Menachem sent me a link to his charity in Israel. So I posted that up and I got flagged. And I got into the boss's office and they're like, we don't want to get political. We don't want to have any issues. You're gonna have to choose another charity. So I'm like, all right, dogs for the blind. You know, like I chose that one.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
like, you know, so
Mm-hmm.
there's like issues where it's like you can't do certain things or say certain stuff. It's not like if I was living in Russia
Mm-hmm.
right now, or if I was in Afghanistan or Iran, like, oh God, it would be the death of me. But
Mm-hmm.
like it's just uncomfortable. It's like walking with a pebble in your shoe. You know,
Yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
it's not like, you know, a terrible,
Mm-hmm.
I have to watch my back. Okay, there's a security guard at my synagogue to make sure no one shoots up the place. Okay, I try to avoid people making snide remarks about, you know, Jewing them down or like, you know, seeing like, oh, you're a Jew. Do you know such and such? Like, it's like mild, like whatever. It's no big deal. People have it worse, but it's just, you know, it's like being myself when I was in TA in high school or being myself when I was in yeshiva.
Uh-huh.
I will never be that way in the work environment. That just doesn't
Right.
happen. You
Right.
have to put on a shell. You have to put on like a front. You got to be very careful with what you say and what you do.
Yes.
And also sometimes
Mm-hmm.
if I feel like I'm talking too Jewy, like I start hating myself. I'm like, ugh, just shut up. You know, like just I try to avoid all of that. I try to like be
Mm-hmm.
this like middle ground kind of person
Yes.
that like I don't want to bring that stuff up. If it comes to a point where I'm missing a day or two because I have holidays coming up, I'll say something, you know, like I jokingly told my boss, I'm like, yeah, you're gonna miss me a lot in October. I'm not gonna be here, you know, and like he started laughing, but like he understood that like I'm not gonna be around. Um, so it just kind of happens that way where it's just I've never really like worked in like a work environment with other from Yidden. I've never really had that. In my feeling, I think it would be fun. It would be interesting. But I guess also it's like they don't want to touch if like being Jewish and being religious, like they don't want to touch that or question that. So like if I'd be like, hey, you know, Fridays I might have to leave early. Like they won't be like, well, technically it's, you know, it's the summertime and Shkia comes in at 8, so you don't really have to leave here till 5. They're not going to do that. They're going to be like, okay, whatever works for you, you know. And I
Uh-huh.
have a workaround where I work longer hours during the week and I hit my 40. Um, you know, but like if I had a firm environment, I guess they wouldn't be so um
Accommodating.
accommodating. Thank you. Thank you. I was thinking the word like what was it? But yeah, they wouldn't be so accommodating where it's like
Accommodating.
they'll cut you slack. They'll be like, we're all going through this. Or like you have a company where it's somebody who's Jewish but anti-religious. Then you
Whoa, that's
got
the
that like
worst.
that sucks where it's like you're gonna have to be like, like, hey, it's Rosh Hashanah, I won't be around. He's like, well, I'm Jewish and I don't have to worry about that. And I'm like, okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the time. It's you just whatever you make it happen. You make it work. You just
I remember one time, the conservative rabbi of my mother's temple had like a thing, like a youth thing when I was, I think, in college or my senior in high school, beginning of college. And so he was talking about, the Jewish kids, that it's a big problem that they were assimilating, that they were dating non-Jews. Some of them were marrying non-Jews. And he brought up the topic, and it was like a luncheon, and where we're discussing like challenges that we might have as young Jewish people at the time. So this one guy says, "Well, I was dating this Jewish girl, and her parents, like, they were kind of like rough with me. They really didn't treat me nicely." He said, "Now I'm dating this Christian girl. Her parents always treat me so politely, so nicely." He says, "Why couldn't my Jewish girlfriend's parents have treated me that way?" So I blurted out, "That's because we know who you are."
it's also they're probably just being super, super polite. That's one thing I realized, like being Jewish and then being in a non-Jewish environment, like we'll be, I guess, technically like American WASP rude, but we'll be very open and straightforward. But you go into like these non-Jewish environments, like they say hello, they're very polite to you, they're very polite and friendly. But it's not like don't it's a whole different world out there. It's a whole different situation. I'm not saying one's good or bad. I'm just saying like that's kind of like how it works out, where you I met I had some time with people that weren't Jewish, very nice, very friendly, had a great time. But it's a different way of talking and acting. Um, it's very interesting though, because like I didn't really speak to anyone or had any contact with anyone that wasn't Jewish until I was like 21, really, because I was in yeshiva the whole time, and then I was in Israel the whole time, and then I finally, after like being graduating, going to Israel for my 2 years, coming back, I finally was in college and talking to people, and that's really when I started to try to figure out like, well, how do I communicate? So I start acting the way I acted when I was in yeshiva, in a way of like just how to talk to people, how to like communicate with people, like it worked for me then, it can work for me now. And like I learned right away, we're like, don't do certain things, don't say certain things. You gotta like it's just these social, faux pas that you
Mm-hmm.
have to be careful with.
It's like
Um,
walking a tightrope.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. It's
Yeah.
definitely like walking a tightrope.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we have less than a minute left. So we'll just call it right now. I love you, Emma. Have a wonderful
love,
Shabbos.
love you. Have a great job, Sterling.
All right, take care.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook at Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I know you would like it, and my mother would too.